Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Perez here, your local Phoenix Realtor. And if you're watching this video, it's probably because you would like to get to know me a little bit more and you would like to know a little bit more about my story. The reason why I'm doing this video is because I figured that a lot of times we see somebody online and we see their personality, we see the way they are, and we always see them in a professional setting. And a lot of times you don't really know the story behind an individual. You don't know how an individual got somewhere. And a lot of times people can resonate when you tell your story. So my idea for this video is that hopefully it resonates with somebody, and that at some point, a couple years down the line, there's a part 2 to this, and there's a lot more to add. If you aren't familiar with me, I just got my real estate license not too long ago, but I've been in the real estate industry for about close to almost 9 to 10 years now. And we're gonna reverse engineer how we got to where we are today, first month into real estate. But let's go back into my childhood journey. So for those who don't know, I am perfectly fluent in Spanish. Sí hablo español. Este es mi idioma natal y soy nacido y criado en Puerto Rico. So what I'm trying to say is that I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I was born there and I was raised there until I was about 5, 6 years old, probably like 6 and a half. And then my parents moved to Florida. We moved to Florida, and that's where I learned how to speak English. We were there for a couple of years, maybe like 7, 8 years. And then we officially came back and I did all of my 4 years of high school in Puerto Rico. Now in between, there was a lot of going back and forth between Puerto Rico. I went to more schools than there are grades. I think I counted it one day and I went to like 17, 18, or 19 schools, somewhere up there. It wasn't at 20, but it was almost at 20. And that was for a lot of reasons. Some of them partly were for mine, some were for financial situations, some were moving, some were some mental health issues that my mom had to deal with. There was a lot of stuff going on in there. And this is not a sob story. I didn't grow up in the ghetto or the hood or grow up really poor or any of that stuff. My parents always made sure that I had food on the table. We lived good. I think I lived a good life. I was not rich. We weren't wealthy. We weren't, traveling everywhere all the time and taking a ton of family vacations, but I never starved. My parents always kept the lights on, bills were always paid, and that's all you could ask for as a kid, is that at least they really helped me in achieving. They really instilled in me a lot of good beliefs. My mom is a follower of Christ. I'm also a believer myself. I had a decent childhood. I wouldn't say it was a bad childhood. I wouldn't say it was the best childhood. There was definitely a lot of traumas and a lot of tribulations and a lot of stuff that kind of happened. But I think everybody can say the same, right? And it doesn't have to be just because your family is okay monetarily. It doesn't mean that you necessarily had a better childhood, right? It's all about the values that you're instilled when you grow up as a child. And I think that my family gave me good ones. And the reason why I want to spend a little bit more time about the childhood, so you guys kind of know where I developed the mentality that I had. And growing up, while the lights weren't never turned off at the house and there was always food on the table, there was a lot of financial hardships and there was a lot of battles between my parents, and leaving and divorce and this, that, and the third, because at the end of the day, a lot of our problems do root from financial problems. When you're a kid, you don't really understand it, especially back then. I remember I used to want a Rubik's Cube. My dad's like, nah, man, I'm not buying no Rubik's Cube, man. That thing's $10. I'm like, Dad, it's $10. And as I don't want to jump forward, but as an adult, I knew what it was like to not have $10. And let me tell you, I wasn't buying a Rubik's Cube. But those are just some of the things that can make us very naive as kids. And we don't understand that, right? They always say, like, you'll be a father, you'll be an adult, you'll understand. And let me tell you, boy, I'm understanding now. Now, to move a little bit forward along in my childhood, we are immigrants, family of immigrants. My grandma immigrated to this country a very long time ago, and because of her, I was fortunate to be born in Puerto Rico. It makes me an American citizen. And, we didn't have to deal with a lot of the struggles that my grandma and my mom had to deal with, being raised in Dominican Republic, from not from a lot of wealth, being raised in a farm out there. And those were things that, my grandma, when she came to this country, she kind of had a vision, she had a plan, and she's seen that plan through. My grandma's on the older side now. So I've only seen the good part of my grandma's life, because by the time I was born, my grandma, my grandpa, they already had, family businesses. They were successful. They had multiple homes. And that's the only thing I know. But I definitely understand that their dedication and the struggles that they had were things that were instilled in me, that from a genetical pool, I would say, the hustler mentality, all of those things, because like I said, I didn't have to struggle much, throughout my childhood, but that hustle, that ambition, I feel like it came from the things that I saw. So growing up in Puerto Rico, my grandparents, they have multiple businesses, multiple houses, and I've always been in that kind of entrepreneurial mindset. And I always knew that I wanted to do big things. I feel like I was destined for it. I had a very big belief. I never felt like I had limiting beliefs as a kid. I always felt that I could fly, and I thought that I would fly, right? And I don't know where that came from, right? Sometimes there's a saying out there that says some of us got that shit you can't teach. And I kind of feel like that sometimes, right? Maybe it was, like I said, from that genetical pool of hustlers in the family. And the reason why I'm telling you that, because it kind of leads me into my, teenage years and my young adulthood, where I'll never forget the moment where, finally moved back to Puerto Rico, to the island. And I remember being 15 years old, and I was in high school, 10th grade, and I was handed a book. It was called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that's the kind of the book that changed everything for me. It's like I already knew this is what I wanted to do, but that showed me that there was a way that I could achieve it, right? Because I didn't really have a plan. I didn't really know, like, okay, like I know I want to be a business owner. I know I want to be rich. I know I want to be wealthy, but I don't really know how to get there, right? I could do the old fashioned way, that like how my grandparents did it. Like my grandparents were slaves to their business. They worked all day, every day, worked their ass off. And they are now successful just because they worked their ass off for a really long time and just lived long enough to see it through. And while I respect them and I have the most love for my grandparents and everything, I didn't want that. I'm like, I don't want to enjoy my wealth when I'm 80. I want to enjoy my wealth young. And I always understood that mindset. And I'm like, look, I don't want to be working 15-hour days like my grandpa and my grandma, and not be able to take a vacation. And so to get back to the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, when this book was delivered to me, I'm not a big reader. I still don't read to this day. I hate reading. And I read that whole book in one sitting, because I just started going and going and going and going and going. And I remember going back to school the next day, and I was telling my best friend, Ricky, and I was like, hey, Ricky, you got to read this book, man. This is the way we're going to do it. Like, this is it. And this was like 10th grade. And that kind of like really changed my mindset, right? And going into 11th grade, I was like, okay, I'm gonna start, feeding the mind and feeding the soul. And I started learning. And then a whole nother year went by. And then everything changed the summer right before I went to my senior year. Same cousin. I saw the same cousin again. And he said, hey man, there's this thing called Forex. You should learn how to trade. People are making, hundreds of thousands of dollars, this, that, and the third. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna get into that. So I started doing that. And then I remember this was 2015. So this was before it was even cool to do this. And I was like, okay, if you know about the book, right, the 4 quadrants, you got the business, you got the investor, you got the employee, and you got the self-employed. And I was like, okay, this puts me right into the investor category, right? That's where I want to be. I don't want to be self-employed or a business owner. So then that leads me to that second point. So, okay, I've got the investing part now. But then there's this thing called network marketing. And this is not a bash on network marketing in any way, shape, or form, because I owe so much to network marketing and the things that I did at that time that have led me to get the results that I have today, right? That decision, that Derek, all of those, everything I learned from network marketing applies to everything. So whether you're a fan of the business or not, that is not the point, but there is a lot of good takeaways from network marketing. The church that I went to, there was a lot of brothers and sisters that were, into network marketing, and I was like, hey man, I kind of want to learn a bit more about what you guys got going on, because, I see a lot of people got success in this. Took me to a meeting. I signed up on the spot, right? I asked my grandma, I was like, hey grandma, I need $100 for this. She gave it to me. I signed up, and that commenced my journey. That commenced my journey in 2015 of entrepreneurship. And yes, people who are in network marketing are entrepreneurs. I will tell them that, because that is still a business that you have to run, and we won't get into the details of that, but that was the start of my entrepreneurship journey. And I remember from that moment forward, I said, you know what? I have a path. I have a way of doing this. All I need to do is do what they tell me, and I'm gonna see the same results. That's it. So I started going to the weekly meetings every Monday. I started, hearing all of the CDs, reading the books, doing the script training, prospecting, doing everything that you need to do. in the business in order to get your business up. And then, you host a meeting and you tell your friends about it. You tell your family members and all of this stuff. And everything obviously went bad. Everything went wrong. I never made any money from it. But what I did was I learned so much about feeding myself and information that I said, you know what, no matter the results, I feel like I'm growing as a person. And no matter what industry I do, I feel like I'm gonna have success. And I did that all of senior year. My senior year was very, very stressful. It was a very, very weird year for me. I didn't have a traditional senior year. I still had fun, but my mindset was already like, okay, I know this is what I want to do. I'm just gonna start a year earlier, and I don't have any regrets. I wish I would have enjoyed it just a little bit more, but I said, look, all my friends are worried about this year partying, this, that, and the third. I'm already gonna start working on my adulthood life because I did go to a specialized baseball academy, all boys school, and I knew that I wasn't gonna, make it in baseball. So I said, I gotta pivot to the next thing, what I wanna do in life, and it's this. And so I just kept going and going and grinding and grinding and grinding. And after a year, 17 years old, when I graduated high school, I moved out to Arizona. I moved out to Arizona by myself. I didn't know a single individual here. I'd never been past Georgia in my life. And I remember, like it was yesterday, got on a Greyhound, 17 years old. 4 days later, started ASU. And that was it. That was my start of really life. 17 years old. I remember I got here and I had $30 to my name. And I said, you know what? This is it. This is it. This is everything you wanted, Derek. It's time to build your life. You're in control of it. You got to do what you got to do. And man, it was a struggle. It was a struggle. I remember my first pen, my first notebook, everything was given to me by my roommate. Because I didn't have enough. I had like $30, but that turned into like 10. Had other situations happen. I lost a bag, so I had to get an Uber to use it. It was crazy, chaotic. That's a whole story within the story. But the point is that I went through that first semester of school, and very quickly, I never wanted to go to school. I kind of just did it because it was like, it was a thing to do. And after a semester, I had a decision at the end of the semester. I was like, look, I can't, I'm not doing school. Like, I can't afford this. I can't pay for this. Nobody helped me. I'm dead broke. I got nothing. And I got two options right here. I can either go back to Florida or to Puerto Rico and kind of just do the same thing that everybody else does when it gets tough. Or I could stay here and I could man up and I could, do my life. And I decided to stay. Clearly, I'm here 10 years later and I manned up. And from there, the way that it pretty much looked like, I said, look, okay, got my own little apartment, got my own little job, started working. And every day, I'll never forget, I worked 7 days a week. And the reason why I worked 7 days a week was because I didn't want to allow myself to get caught up in the weekends and lose my weekends. And I needed more time in my days. So my schedule was 7 to 2 every day, Monday through Monday, except Wednesdays, I would work a double shift. I would work from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. To make up so I would get my 40 hours for the week. And that was my day where I was like, okay, get home, go to sleep, wake up the next day, do it again. And I did that for about a year and a half until then I was let go from the job. And that was the best thing that could have happened to me, But what a lot of people don't understand is that during that period, that was the period that like really made Derek. Because every single day in the morning I would wake up and the first thing I would do, the reason why I would get up at 8 a.m. and I would do the prep was because we didn't open until 11 a.m. So from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., I said, you know what? I'm gonna feed my mind. I'm gonna feed my soul. I'm gonna listen to podcasts. I'm gonna listen to personal development. And I started really learning. And if you do the math, 3 hours a day, every day, it was very rare that I listened to music. I mean, I probably listened to music once a week, 3 hours a day, every day, feeding the mind for a year and a half. And then when I finally got let go, all of the stuff that I had been working on, right? It was not easy at all. But all of the stuff that I started working on, I got my first camera, I got my first microphone, I started making my first, videos on social media, I started taking photos, and next thing you know, I started running my business and things started progressing. And there's obviously a lot more details in there. And if you're interested in them, I would totally get on the phone and share all the details with you. But this video would be an hour long if I sat here and gave you all the details. And during that time, we're talking about now probably like 2018. And I remember I had a girlfriend at the time, and we went to Puerto Rico, and I had some momentum in my business. I had finally got a car, this, that, and the third. And by the way, this car was paying like 26% on the car. So it wasn't that necessarily things were going right or I was progressing, but I was just kind of, doing the adult things that you got to do. And the reason why I tell that story is because, bills started getting a little bit bigger, responsibilities started getting a little bit bigger. I had a gig that was, well paying for the time. It was doing what it needed to do, and something went wrong with that gig. Basically, it was just something. We had a drone. The drone fell, broke. He was like, "All right, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore." That's basically what happened. But right there, my income stopped, and I was doing DoorDash on the side to kind of maintain myself. And I remember that this happened, and I had about $1,500 left. And this story is gonna make a lot of sense because there's a breakthrough moment. And I had about $1,500 that he was gonna pay me, and at the time that was enough. I said, okay, I'll take that 1,500. I'll go to Puerto Rico. I'll enjoy the time with my girlfriend. And this drone fell, and that was it. Like, he was like, you know what, I'm not gonna do this anymore. And just like that, $1,500 were gone. My monthly payment was gone, and I was like, babe, I still gotta pay the car. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. So I remember I drove 15 hours of DoorDash every day for like the next 10 days to make the amount of money that was the 1,500 that I was supposed to make for my bills. And when I got to Puerto Rico, you know how much I had? I had $0.00. I remember I went on that trip. It wasn't the best trip. Dead broke. Tell my grandma, like, it was just bad. I remember, my girlfriend at the time let me borrow $200 just to kind of get by. And my grandma, when we left, she gave me $200, and I gave them to her. And I told her, I said, look, you know what? I want can I get that $200 back? Because I forgot when I get home, I gotta put gas in the car, I gotta get some food and some stuff. But like, let me just, I gotta change a tire. And when I do that, my first $200, like, I promise I'll pay you back, which I did. But I remember when I got back, I sat down by myself and I looked in the mirror, man, and then I told her, I told myself, I told her, and I said, you know what? I'm done. I will never be put in this situation again. I never want to, stress about money, about financial. Like, I'm done. That's it. I'm done. I'm gonna do whatever it takes. And from that moment forward, I hit up every single person on my phone. And I said, I'm doing video shoots. You get a video and photos for $100. The only thing is that you gotta do it within 2 hours. All of a sudden, I had a bunch of people flooding. Oh, we want that $100. Mind you, I had to work a full day at DoorDash to make $100. All of a sudden, I had 5 people paying me $100 in a day, so I made $500. And all that momentum, I started building that momentum. And then I remember 2018, November is my birthday. I'll never forget a very key moment in my life, that it was the first time where, like, I had a little bit of money. I made like I think like $7,000 or $8,000 in a month. By the way, I spent it all, not in a dumb way, because I was reinvesting in my business. So I was like, I got the lights I wanted, I got the camera I wanted, I got the gimbal I wanted, right? And I just kept investing, and did that for many, many years. But in that moment, in November, I remember I took my girlfriend to dinner, and I spent $100 at Benihana's in 2018, November 2018. And that was the first time I ever spent $100 on a meal. And I felt like that was the satisfaction that I got from that moment. Like, I actually don't think I've had that type of satisfaction again, to be honest, because it was so big for me to spend $100 on a meal, because I don't even remember my parents, probably, I don't know, but I remember telling her, I was like, look, man, like, I just spent $100 on a meal. And it was such a big accomplishment. And it was Benihana's. I've probably been in Benihana maybe once after that in my life. But at the time, that was a big accomplishment for me. And to kind of bring things up to where we're at now, right? I won't get into a lot more details of my story. But that decision, that moment, I kept that momentum going for some time. And then 2019, I finally made, I made $60,000 or $65,000 that year. It was the first time that I ever made, that was the most amount of money I had made at the time. And then 2020, I was the most amount of money I had made at the time. And I just kept doing that for some years. And then all of a sudden, from really high, I went really low. I had a really bad point in my life. I was, dead broke again. And that curve was kind of going like this. And that was 2021, 2022 were really rough years for me financially. A lot of people don't know that, but yeah, it was tough. Going from making close to $175,000 in 1 year to then making almost nothing. it was a really hard situation, and it was a situation that honestly I needed to go through because it's allowed me now 5, 6 years later to really value things differently. I did do the dumb shit. I bought the car. I bought the designer. I spent money on dumb dinners, and it wasn't $100, and it was $500, $600, right? Like all of those things, but all of that is growth. You got to look at it as growth, and you got to look at it as a learning lesson. And for me, to fast forward a little bit more, and again, there's so many more details about this story. I think that, once 2023, 2024 started rolling around, I started making good money again. I started having this feeling that I was back on track. And I had a really good year, 2024, and then 2025, came, and my income is just not where it used to be. And if you know anything about me, you know that like I've been in the marketing background for pretty much that whole entire time, but I've been very deep into the real estate industry, and I had to kind of make some reflective thoughts in 2025, specifically towards the end, and just kind of tell myself like, look, man, what do you want to do moving forward? What do you want to do with your life? Like when I was 17, 18, 19, during that whole time, I was really grinding. I was doing everything that I needed to do to see success. And then I was dead broke again. And then I like kind of grinded again, and then kind of saw a little bit of success. But then I felt very stagnant. I felt like I had reached a ceiling, and I didn't really know which direction in my life. And I actually started developing limiting beliefs, and I didn't even realize that. And essentially, to kind of get to the present day, I felt this year that I really needed a change in 2026, and I felt that this was the year that everything that I've gone through, every trial, every tribulation, every heartbreak, every moment was gonna lead to this, and that's been almost 10 years from that moment that I told you when I got that 2015, 2016, started network marketing and all those things, and my life looked a certain way for 10 years. But you know what? I made a decision this year that in 2026, my life is gonna look completely different for the next 10 years. And I've been thinking about getting my real estate license and doing all this stuff. And, I had a lot of limiting beliefs in myself of like, can I really do this? Do I want to deal with clients? Do I want to put myself out there? Do I want to do what it takes? And after a long conversation with myself, I came to the realization that I had to man up. I had to man up, and I had to do the things that I wanted to do for myself and for my future family. Fortunately or unfortunately, the way that my life was going, I didn't think that I was going to be put in a position to be able to maintain a family and to hit my goals and to do the things that I wanted to do. So this year, I made that switch, and I made that change in that career path, and I feel like I've got control of my life again. I feel like I'm on the path that I need to be, and I feel like I have the best vehicle in order to see the amount of results. And I hope that this story kind of resonates with you. Obviously, there's a lot of details in there, and I would gladly share them with you. We can get on the phone, and I can talk your head off all day and tell you about kind of what a lot of the details that were there. But essentially, that's my story. That's how I got to where I am right now. There's a lot of, I think that a lot of people will probably resonate with this, and hopefully it changes somebody's life, and hopefully it changes somebody's perspective for the better, and it gives you a better understanding of where I come from, my background, why I'm doing what I do, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So with that being said, as you guys know, this is Derek Perez, your local Phoenix Realtor. I'm here for all your real estate needs, and I hope that this story you can gain a lot of value from it, and yeah, if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Peace.